I don't know if your parents ever told you or you ever told your children, watch your mouth. That's kind of what Solomon has been saying to us. Watch your mouth. There are so many verses in the book of Proverbs about the tongue, about our words. You see that your sermon notes there, 2 pages long, because of all of the verses that I've printed out for you. And there was a whole page that we looked at last week. But you probably know some of the sayings about the tongue. The tongue weighs practically nothing, but so few can hold it. Or words are free, but it's how you use them that may cost you. But in James chapter 3, and if you want to turn there, because we're going to be all over Proverbs, so if you want to look at James chapter 3 back in the New Testament after the book of Hebrews, the book of James, chapter 3, James is very well-known treatise on the tongue, starting in verse 3 of James 3. When we put bits into the mouths of horses to make them obey us, we can turn the whole animal. Or take ships as an example. Although they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they are steered by a very small rudder wherever the pilot wants to go. Likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. The tongue also is a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole body, sets the whole course of one's life on fire, and it itself is set on fire by hell. All kinds of animals, birds, reptiles, and sea creatures are being tamed and have been tamed by mankind. But no human being can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil, full of deadly poison. Well, Solomon certainly understood the challenge of trying to control the tongue, and he gave us so many different proverbs. I mentioned to you last week that Bob Diffenbaugh has tried to take the time to organize the different kinds of sayings that Solomon gives us about the tongue. He probably would not recognize this outline, but the motivation came from him. Last week we started by looking at times when words are ineffective and times when silence is golden. Donna and I were talking at lunch after the service last week, and she said, you know, when you talk about words, it's more than just what people say anymore, especially in our society. It's what you type, in social media, on Facebook, and in emails, and in texts, and in tweets. So many of us probably type more words than we speak. And so when we think about words and our tongue, if James were writing today, he would include, be careful what you put out on social media, be careful what you put out on your emails as well. So we continue our study of what Solomon teaches us about the tongue by saying, point number 3 in this lesson, there are uses of words that are clearly forbidden. There are things that Solomon says just don't ever do with your words. First, don't break a confidence. Chapter 11, verse 13. All of the scriptures, unless I mention otherwise, are from Proverbs. A gossip betrays a confidence, but a trustworthy person keeps a secret. Don't break a confidence. Have you ever been betrayed by someone who broke your confidence? It's hard to get that trust back. Now, Christians do it all the time, but we do it in a very spiritual way. We say, now I promised I wouldn't say anything, but I know that you won't tell anybody. And I need you to help me pray about, right? We don't gossip, we call the prayer chain. But sometimes it's the same thing. Don't break a confidence. Second, don't stir up strife. Chapter 20, verse 3. It is to one's honor to avoid strife, but every fool is quick to quarrel. Don't stir up strife. He is not saying that you can never disagree with somebody. But he is saying, do it without being disagreeable in your attitude and your spirit. You know people that just try to go around stirring up trouble. Solomon says don't be one of those people. Don't stir up strife. The old saying, you can disagree without being disagreeable. Third, don't waste time trying to correct or instruct a fool. 23 verse 9, do not speak to fools, for they will scorn your wisdom. When I first read that verse, I thought, wait a minute. Does that mean we're not supposed to say good morning to them? Does it mean don't speak to them at all? And you've got to study these words. We've been saying that all through this study of the book of Proverbs. This particular word, speak, means to arrange words in order. In other words, he's talking about teaching. And what he's saying is, don't waste your time trying to teach somebody who's a fool. And I refer you again, and I did it last week, I refer you again, the sermon is still online, I checked last night. The sermon on how to recognize and relate to a mocker. It's January 15, 2017. Solomon has so much to say about there's a group of people that you should not even try to teach. You shouldn't try to correct them. You shouldn't try to instruct them. They have demonstrated themselves to be a mocker or a scorner or a fool. And again, our thing is, yeah, but I've been praying for them, and I just feel like if I could talk to them, that it would, no. And it just blows back up in your face. And you said, what did I do? I think for Christians, this is one of the toughest areas for us to get a hold of. And so that's why I keep referring back to that lesson, because I spent a lot of time putting it together, because I've got a lot of issues with that. And that January the 15th lesson on how to relate to and recognize a mocker. What Solomon says here is, don't try to instruct or correct somebody who has demonstrated themselves to be a fool. It's just going to blow up in your face. If I had a church full of teenagers, I would really preach on this next point. Don't curse your parents. Chapter 20, verse 20. If someone curses their father or mother, their lamp will be snuffed out in pitch darkness. Next, he says, don't lie. That ought to go without saying, but not anymore, right? 19 verse 5, a false witness will not go unpunished. Whoever pours out lies will not go free. Chapter 4 verse 24 broadens that. Keep your mouth free of perversity. Keep corrupt talk far from your lips. And those words mean words that twist the truth or distort the truth or perverts or misrepresents what is true. There's a lot of that going on in the world today. Did you hear that so-and-so said, and then they take one phrase from the middle of a paragraph, No, you got to look at the whole thing. Don't lie and don't deceive by twisting or distorting what's the truth. And then he says, don't flatter. What is flattery? Basically, flattery is telling somebody what they want to hear with very insincere and excessive compliments so that you can get something from them, or so that you can deceive them. Every parent knows what flattery is. It's what your children do for you the 3 weeks before Christmas, or what do you want? It's what husbands do when we either want something stupid or we've done something stupid. It's that flattery, that excessive praise to try to manipulate somebody, to try to get our way. Solomon said, don't flatter. Chapter 26, verse 28, a lying tongue hates those it hurts, and a flattering mouth works ruin. Basically what he's saying is, if you keep listening to flattering, you're going to be ruined by that very flattery. 28:23, whoever rebukes a person will in the end gain favor rather than one who has a flattering tongue. Because eventually, people see through the flattery, and they realize they should have listened to the person that was saying, you need to correct this, or you need to look out for this. In chapter 29, verse 5, those who flatter their neighbors are spreading nets for their feet. So don't flatter. Next he says, don't gossip. In the very, very strictest sense of the word, in the most narrow sense of the word, gossip is either exaggerating something or a flat-out lie trying to hurt somebody. Chapter 18, verses 6 through 8, he talks about the lips of fools bringing them strife. Verse 7, the mouths of fools are their undoing. And then verse 8 is kind of an interesting verse. It kind of took me aback. The words of a gossip are like choice morsels. They go down to the inmost parts. What in the world is he saying? And then I thought, well, that's true. You just can't wait to hear what do you call it? Some juicy bit of gossip, right? Because you just want to chew on it and mull on it, and it makes you feel good. But what's interesting is other translations translate that the words of a gossip are like wounds that go down deep. Because it can certainly harm you, as you all know. Chapter 20, verse 19, a gossip betrays a confidence, so avoid anyone who talks too much. I said in the most narrow, strictest sense, the word gossip has to do with exaggeration or lies. But in the broader sense, gossip is any kind of communication, even telling the truth, with the desire or the motivation to cause somebody harm. Like the guy said, I don't gossip about my neighbors. Everything I say about them's the truth. But that falls under this phrasing. Don't gossip. What he's saying is, don't try to tear people down. Even if something's true about them, you don't have to go around telling everybody and tearing people down. Then he says, don't boast. And I had to study on this a little bit. Chapter 25, verse 14, like clouds and wind without rain is one who boasts of gifts never given. 27:2, let someone else praise, and it's the same word as boast in this chapter 25, verse 14. And not your own mouth, an outsider, and not your own lips. I said, wait a minute. Let another person praise you, not yourself. But a lot of people on their jobs today have to do performance reviews. And part of performance reviews is you have to say how you rate yourself, in certain things. And somebody said, well, I can't boast about what I've done because the Bible says don't boast. So I just have to say I'm average. When you know good and well that you put in extra time, you make the extra effort, your work is above and beyond, and there's something about this false humility that says, I can't say that. Somebody else is supposed to praise me, not myself. Well, I'm going to give you Ken's Proverbs. On your job, he that tooteth not his own horn, verily it shall not be tooted. Right? And y'all have lived long enough to know. This verse is not saying don't let your boss know the compliments you got. It's not saying don't send your personnel file when somebody sends you a nice card thanking you for what you've done. I dug into this word boast, and it means to make a show. He's not talking about don't say positive things about yourself. He's not talking about don't let people know, don't let your boss know the compliments you got. What he's saying is don't put on an empty show. And you all know people who put on an empty show. All right, so I wanted to clarify that with you and with me, that when these verses say don't boast, and you get some insight because 25:14 he says one who boasts of gifts never given. He's not saying you can't say I exceeded my expectations on this job. He is not saying I rate myself 5 out of 5. He's not saying you can't do that. He's not saying don't send your boss the good compliments you've gotten. Don't tell your boss what you did. What he's saying is don't put on an empty show. Okay? So, next time on your performance review, give yourself all 5s. It's good. Or at least don't blame the Bible if you don't, okay? If you don't deserve it, but So, please, I just wanted to make sure that you understand, because so many of us face situations where if our bosses don't know, they can't, if you get rated and if your rating involves a raise and those kind of things. So I hope that's clear to you. Doesn't mean you can't pass on the positive things you've heard or done. It means don't make an empty show. So, these are times when we're not supposed to use our words to do these things. However, what I really want to focus on today is our words can give life. You remember those verses we looked at from chapter 10, verse 11. The mouth of the righteous is a fountain of life. Verse 31, from the mouth of the righteous comes the fruit of wisdom. Let's go chapter 10, verse 21. The lips of the righteous nourish many. Proverbs 16:24, gracious words are a honeycomb, sweet to the soul and healing to the bones. Those are challenging verses. The mouth of the righteous is a fountain of life. The mouth of the righteous gives wisdom. The lips of the righteous nourish. Don't you want to be that kind of person? That your words nourish and give life and give wisdom and give encouragement to people. So those are kind of overarching principles, and then Solomon digs into specifics. Our speech gives life when it's directed by God. Chapter 16, verse 1. To humans belong the plans of the heart, but from the Lord comes the proper answer of the tongue. We need to let God direct our speech. That's what he says in Mark 13 to his disciples. He says, when you get put on trial for your faith, I will give you the words to say. Too many people misinterpret that passage. And they say, well, the Bible says don't give thought to what I speak, just pray and I'll give you what to say. And my dad used to say, there are preachers who pray that. Lord, they don't do any preparation. They stand up behind the pulpit and expect the Lord to fill their mouth. And he says they usually fill it with hot air. He's not talking about don't prepare for your presentation. He's saying if you get put on trial for your faith, trust that God's going to give you the words to say. Our speech gives life when it's directed by God. We talked last week about one of the purposes of silence being to give you the time to ask God what I should say and how I should say it. Second, our speech gives life when it shares wisdom and knowledge. 15 verse 7, the lips of the wise spread knowledge. That word is the word that comes from the word that the Bible uses when it talks about knowledge of God. Do your words help people learn more about God? Do your words about God accurately reflect who God is? We've all heard people who claim to be Christians spewing a lot of words and say, that's not in the Bible, and that certainly isn't who God is. We need to make sure that we share accurate wisdom and knowledge. In chapter 31, that passage about the virtuous woman, she speaks with wisdom, and faithful instruction is on her tongue. Third, our speech gives life when we share our faith. 13 verse 14, the teaching of the wise is a fountain of life, turning a person from the snares of death. Another time Solomon says, he that wins souls is wise. When we share our faith, when we talk to people about God, when we are the teaching of the wise, it brings a fountain of life and turns people from the snares of death. Share your faith. Fourth, our speech gives life when we correct the wise. Chapter 25, verse 12. It's like an earring of gold or an ornament of fine gold is the rebuke of a wise judge to a listening ear. Just as we are not to try to correct the fools, our speech can give life when we correct someone who is wise. Hopefully you're wise, and when people correct you, you're listening to what they have to say as the Lord guides you in that area. Fifth, our speech gives life when we speak up for the oppressed. Chapter 31, verses 8 and 9. The social workers' verses. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and needy. That's pretty good verses for all of us. Our speech gives life when we speak up for the oppressed. Sixth, our speech gives life when we minister to the needs of others with our words. Chapter 12, verse 18. The words of the reckless pierce like swords. The tongue of the wise brings healing. 12:25. Anxiety weighs down the heart, but a kind word cheers it up. 15:4. The soothing tongue is a tree of life. A perverse tongue crushes the spirit. 16:24. Gracious words are a honeycomb, sweet to the soul and healing to the bones. We talked a couple of weeks ago about those contrasting proverbs that have the word but in the middle. Did you notice that? The words of the reckless pierce like swords. The tongue of the wise bring healing. Anxiety weighs down the heart. A kind word cheers it up. The soothing tongue is a tree of life. A perverse tongue crushes the spirit. Which are you? Which words are yours? Are they piercing, weighing down, crushing words? Or are they words of cheer and healing and soothing? I spent a little bit of time, not a lot of time, but I spent a little bit of time trying to come up with a more creative title for these lessons than Watch Your Mouth. And I was thinking about some of the songs about words. I'll use a song title or something. And I just couldn't come up with anything because words are powerful. You know, there's one song that's called It's Only Words. Well, no. Words can... One of the biggest lies we tell children, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never harm me. Oh man, words can harm you much deeper and much longer lasting than sticks and stones ever can. Some of you could immediately think of things that people have said to you or about you that you still struggle with today. Don't underestimate the power of words to minister comfort and encouragement to people. Don't ever underestimate the power of words to bring comfort, to bring encouragement, to bring cheer, because you know how much those words can hurt you and discourage you and crush your spirit. One of Victoria's colleagues had a death in his family, and she gave him a card this week, and he said to her, I never understood how wonderful cards could be. He says, I've kept every one I've gotten. Words. You know, the words of comfort, the words of encouragement, the words that lift your spirit. Now, it's just words. Don't ever underestimate the power of your words to bring comfort and encouragement, because you know how powerful they are to just absolutely crush your spirit. I've told you before about a pastor, R.W. Dale, back in the heyday of preaching in England. And what's interesting is when I have read biographies of great preachers, I have found out that almost without exception, the ones whose names live on for generations battled a lot of depression and discouragement. And Mondays were horrid days because they just felt like they had not done a good job on Sunday. We're still reading their sermons and studying them hundreds of years later, but they felt like they were utter failures. And R.W. Dale writes about a time when it was one of those Mondays. And he said he was walking downtown and he saw one of his parishioners headed his way. And he said, I was not in the mood. I didn't feel like being the preacher. And he started to cut across the road to go down the other sidewalk. He said, but she saw me. And she called out for me. And I was trapped. And when she got closer to me, she said, Pastor, I just want to thank you for your message yesterday. It was exactly what I needed to hear, and it gave me direction that kept me from ruining my life. And he said all of a sudden, the burden lifted, the discouragement lifted, and he felt like he was okay again, right? The power of words. So I expect all of you to tell me what a good man. No. But the power of words. You know the power of words. Our speech gives life when you minister to others by your words. Say, well, I can't do much. Well, you can speak an encouraging word to somebody. It is amazing. Maybe I emphasize this so much because I see the power of it in healthcare. You know, when there's somebody who's been in bed for 6 weeks and they're battling all kinds of illnesses and they're beginning to wake up and they're beginning to start getting their stuff together again, and they're discouraged. When somebody comes into the room and says, man, you're not the same person you were 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks ago, we didn't think you were going to make it. Look at you, sitting up in the chair, talking, carrying on a conversation. That's incredible. And to watch the expression of their face change. And you can see their spirits lifting. Just the power of words. We need that. Don't ever underestimate the power of your words to give life, to give encouragement, to give hope, to minister to the needs of other people. So therefore, pray to say the right thing at the right time and in the right way. We talked about this last week. We're going to talk about it again today. Because remember, we talked about words being ineffective when the timing's wrong. Lord, help me to say the right thing. Help me to say it at the right time. Because there are times when they're not ready to hear. And help me to say it in the right way. Because sometimes you can say the right thing, but you say it in the wrong way, and they react to how you said it rather than what you said. So Lord, help me to know what to say. Help me to know when I'm supposed to say it and how I'm supposed to say it. 15:23. A person finds joy in giving an apt reply, and how good is a timely word. 25:11. Like apples of gold and settings of silver is a word spoken in right circumstances. 15. A gentle answer turns away wrath. 16:23. The hearts of the wise make their mouths prudent. Their lips promote instruction. The power of words. The right words at the right time in the right way. So no wonder David prayed, Lord, set a guard over my mouth. Keep watch over the door of my lips. I want to close with a verse that I mentioned to you several weeks ago. Decades ago, I was in a conference, and the pastor that was speaking to us spoke on Isaiah chapter 50, verse 4. The sovereign Lord has given me a well-instructed tongue to know the word that sustains the weary. He wakens me morning by morning. He wakens my ear to listen like one being instructed. The King James says, the Lord God has given me the tongue of the learned, that I should know how to speak a word in season to him that is weary. And the New King James says, he awakens my ear to hear. Every good human being, let alone every Christian, ought to want to speak encouragement to the weary. And that word weary means fatigued, worn out, exhausted. Know anybody like that? Are anybody like that? I want to speak the word of encouragement to the person who's barely hanging on. How do you do that? He told us. He wakens my ear to hear. The secret is, God, instruct me today on how I should speak to the weary souls I come in contact with today. Let's make that our prayer. Lord, help me today. Help me to hear you so that I know what to say and how to say it and when to say it to the people I come in contact with today, so that I can speak a word in season to him that is weary. What a challenge. Too much negative words going on, too many words that tear down going on. Paul says, let your words build up, not tear down. Would you read, this is the Apostle Paul's take on Isaiah 50. It's Colossians 4. It's in your notes. Read it with me, please. Let your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. Wow. And the prayer that we ended last week with, we'll end it again today. Read it with me, please. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. And now may the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face to shine on you and give you his peace, now and evermore. Amen. God bless you. Thanks for coming out today. You're dismissed.